The Dreamcast, the console that everyone loves for its niche library that people pretend they played. Even with it being publicly raped by the PS2, it still featured a vast expanse of games that were ahead of their time. By like a few years, but still ahead of their time. Dozens of young, talented individuals from Sega's internal staff were brought on to work on its brief lineup. A lot of them resulting in games that featured groundbreaking visuals and mechanics that would send ripples through the industry. Or just plain fucking weird.
Oh, that feels good.
Case in point, Jet Set Radio. Coming out of the soul-sounding, ass-munching development of Panzer Dragoon RPG, the group of Zoomers at Smilebit wanted to make a game that was more contemporary, appealing to the 15 to 20-something demographic that was prevalent at the company. Having their offices located dead center in Shibuya allowed them to get a first-hand look at the street culture and bustling nightlife that would go on to inspire the game's general concept. The game would eventually evolve into a semi-open world inline skating game with a heavy Antifa theme that had you tagging the streets and fucking over the cops. The team went further to solidify the project's vision by taking a look at alternative fashion magazines as inspirations for character designs and even bringing out legit street artists to work on graffiti art for the game. All the effort resulted in a slick and stylish rollerblading platformer that blew the doors off in terms of what could be achieved on the system with its heavy yet vibrant punk aesthetic oozing out of every bit. The gameplay loop is tight and simple enough. You go around these compact city sandboxes, grinding on thick, hard rails, riding on walls, and jumping on roofs, marking your territory with graffiti art that you collect along the way. If you ain't satisfied with this shitty, disjointed trash art, you're able to express your creativity to the fullest by creating your own graffiti. With the notoriety you gain by spraying your canned liquids on the streets, you'll of course start getting some heat after you. Captain What's-His-Fuck is the bastard child of Dick Gumshoe and Angry Joe, hell-bent on taking down the demented youths on the street. The man literally doesn't have a single ounce of chill, as he'll try anything to take you down by sending out riot police, attack dogs, military troops, tanks, and even attack choppers. His massive incompetency, however, leads to a shadowy mob group stepping in and sending out waves of loaded goons, suicide bombers, jetpack shooters, pyromaniacs, and jihadis all over New York. It was a different time back then. You're not the only shit-spraying punks around, as you'll be constantly clashing with rival gangs in the area. You got the dykes from Shibuya, the neats lurking Ben 10, and the serial rapists terrorizing Kogane-cho. You'll go around playing a vandalizing game of cat and mouse with these groups, culminating in a chase sequence where you tramp stamp each member into submission. These boss stages are clunky and poorly executed. Not only is maintaining speed and momentum nigh on impossible, but navigating some of these areas can be a little tough, requiring you to have perfect execution to do some tight platforming. The added feature of collision detection, having enemies send you flying to the Philippines with a slight brush, works towards making these segments into quite the spiritual sounding. The fun of skating around the streets all depends on going fast and keeping that momentum going. Only issue being that shit's pretty trash. You can build up speed instantly by dicking around with walls, slopes, or rails and then lose it just as easily. A slight bump, trip, pivot, scratch, sneeze, cough, or gust of wind will stop any impetus you had, making you control all sluggish and poopy. The same thing happens when you pull a simple jump, having you fly up for some serious airtime and pulling you back down with the force of a freight truck. To its credit, the weight of the characters feels surprisingly realistic, despite it shockingly not controlling so hot, even if everyone wants you to believe otherwise. This, of course, affects the platforming severely, which at times can be a gigantic pain with a fridge-like movement and camera seemingly at odds with each other, forcing you to wrestle with the controls until you finally pull off that stupid rail jump. You'll soon start getting into contact with other weirdos desperate to join your gang. If you want them to join you, you'll have to illogically take them up on their offer and prove that you're good enough for them to join you by doing one of two challenges. The first one being an acrobatic Simon Says, while the other game has you racing to a tag goal that you will eventually get lost while doing so and lose 10 times over. The number of people that get to join your crew is pretty large and diverse. You start off with the initial 3-act group of Poster Boy, Poster Girl, and the Wigger. It then expands to the Crazy Ass, the E-Girl, I Told You to Fuck Off, Shit! Squidward, Watermelons, and of course, some juicy fucking money bait. Even the fucking dog is playable. Each character has its own unique design aesthetic and memorable personality regardless of any involvement with the plot, which leads me to the game's timeless appeal that's found all over the presentation. There was no way of avoiding this title when it dropped, seeing as it was the first commercial game to ever use the now common cel-shaded graphics style by taking advantage of the Dreamcast's hardware. Shut the fuck up, for your fact no one loves you. All the textures are drawn with flat, vibrant colors and sharp, angular details, which are then rendered out with these thick, black, meaty outlines, making it all pop out. It's one of the smartest and best looking use of stylized graphics to date, fitting in perfectly with the bold and angular look of the graffiti style it's based on. All of it, of course, held up by the immaculate art direction. Animations on characters like Big Dick DJ Professor K show off an impressive amount of expression with exaggerated squat and stretch animations. Christ, stop spitting on me. What the fuck is wrong with you? All three districts have a distinct and vibrant look to them. Shibuya-cho is a busy street filled with crowded shops, pedestrians, and lots of traffic. Kogane-cho is a gorgeous portside residential district with hundreds of houses stacked up and crammed next to one another, and a wide sewer system leading to a massive arena-sized junker and a half-pipe court, all bathed in the warm orange hue coming from the sunset. And lastly, there's a sprawling neon clusterfuck over at Benten-cho. Streets are tight and cluttered, platforms are small, and I fucking hate it. Sure is pretty though. The international release added 2 new segments in New York. One has you hopping billboards and crashing into buildings downtown, and the Times Square stage was meticulously developed in a lab by the team's best level designers to deliver the most frustrating and downright sadistic experience in the game, with convoluted grind rails surging with electricity, hard-to-reach tag locations, and of course some missile-firing helicopters that knock you down midair, tripling the damage you take. All while listening to licensed Rob Zombie and Jurassic 5 tracks on blast. Oh, so you thought I was gonna skip over the music, huh? Why the fuck do you think I made this video in the first place? Freaking retard. Real talk, the soundtrack is what really elevates this pro skater knockoff to cult status. Meet Hideaki Yano. He joined Sega in the late 90s by working as a sound editor and composer for games like Sega Rally 2, and I'm not gonna pronounce that shit. Jet Set Radio was his first breakout hit, instantly solidifying him as a legendary composer in the company. You immediately get a taste of his signature style with hyperactive beats and cuts of samples from popular tracks in old-time TV and radio. It's impossible to have a discussion about JSR without bringing up tracks like Wreck Mom Sleep, slapping you with that electric organ over a frantic breakbeat and fast record scratches practically bursting with energy. Same thing can be said for Rock It On and its vibrant mix of fun jazz-inspired keys and guitar over chopped-up samples of Two in Line and fucking Flava Flav, turning the track into a rebellious anthem with Viva la Revolucion being shouted over and over. Other tracks like to keep it on the down low, with a bigger focus on a funky beat and a catchy bass line, as seen in tracks like Humming the Bass Line. Grace and Glory is a track that embodies the game's threat, opening with the chilling operatic vocals before breaking down into a steady house beat mixed in with a mesmerizing arpeggio and a subtle use of Music Factory bolted onto the bridge. It's cold, menacing, intimidating, and funky as shit. Richard French Fox Jump Around is another standout track, going for a straight hip-hop vibe in its percussion that blends in with the funky guitar riffs and bass line, on top of sweeping saxes and wild James Brown screaming marking its peaks. Bitch Boy Writes Funky Radio is a straight up banger and my personal favorite out of the whole game. It's got it all: a heavy dick slapping beat, grimy synths, the sublime use of light distortion on the vocals, and a juicy bass that carries the track wherever it wants to go. If you're a smegma-eating, cum-gargling diaper boy who wallows in his own diarrhea all fucking day and somehow don't enjoy any of the music on offer, there's still some alternative rock tracks that provide a more diverse sound. Tracks by indie J-rock group Guitar Vader introduced me to the band before they quickly became my favorite Jap band out of the three I know. The music featured here isn't anything bold or amazing, instead having a bigger emphasis on slick, quick riffs covering a range of tones in a single track. Also, did I mention that there's a fucking Rob Zombie track? In my eyes, Jet Set Radio is a cult classic that I urge everyone to check out at least once in their lives. I undoubtedly have a huge bias towards this game, seeing as it's my favorite Dreamcast game, one that heavily influenced my young spurg mind as a child for years to come. The polyamorous marriage between the stylized graphics, game mechanics, and music is what ultimately makes it a shining gem and a cute time capsule for the rebellious attitude of the late 90s transitioning into the aughts. The biggest flaw is definitely the dated and uncharacteristically weighted dated controls, coupled with the lack of foresight and level design that often demands perfect execution. It's a massive blemish that can lead to a generally frustrating experience. If only there existed a sequel to such a game that fixed up all of its glaring faults while drastically improving its already established strengths and elevating the game into a flawless masterpiece that also hasn't been locked on the original Xbox for the past 17 years. No, seriously, Sega, go eat a fucking dick.
Penetration, rapid fire through your skull. Shot home and taking it back to the days of trying to lose control.